Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We are going to pick up on part 17 of Posted today. I am starting on page 162. Throughout the day, notes continued to pop up everywhere, not just on lockers, on bathroom stalls, on teachers' doors, on windows and display cases. There was one on the fire alarm that said, "In case of emergency, run like HELL," though that one didn't stay up long. There was another on the first stall of the boys' bathroom that said, "Toxic waste site, proceed with caution." There were dozens more, one posted outside a computer lab, a warning of a nerd crossing, and had a picture of a stick figure in glasses. Another outside the band room that said the same. The one outside the teacher's lounge said, "Warning, zombies spotted in area." It didn't stay up long either. Cameron Cole was right. As much as I hated to admit it, a lot of these notes were removed almost as soon as they were posted. But not all of them. Some were clever, others were just dumb. Then there were the ones from Mr. Sword's class. You could tell because the words often filled the whole square and most of them made you want to vomit in your mouth. Things like, "A stranger is just a friend you haven't met yet," and "There's no band-aid for a broken heart." Per Mr. Sword's instructions, they were all anonymous, but you could always tell who they were from. If not from the handwriting, then from the message itself. I recognized the one attached to Jason Baker's locker instantly. I'd read it once already. I even stuck around long enough to see Jason show up and peel the note free, crumbling it into a marble-sized wad and dropping it onto the floor. I waited till he was gone before I went and picked it up and read it again to myself. "Words are ghosts that can haunt us forever." I put it in my backpack, thinking the person who wrote it might want it back, that he might find a better place to put it. Getting a message, though, to some people was just like trying to hammer a nail through a concrete block with your forehead. It would take something more than a few words pinned on a sticky note to get Jason Baker's attention. In his case, the sword would probably be mightier. I forgot all about the note by lunch, though, and it stayed in my backpack. Bench skipped out again, saying he had to talk to Coach Mallory about something. He didn't say what, and I didn't ask. Instead, I sat between Dee Dee and Rose, and we played together another game where we tried to see who could keep a corn chip in their mouth the longest without crunching it. I was the first one out. Rose won handedly. She seemed to be in a good mood, smiling and laughing and teasing Dee Dee mercilessly, but Wolf seemed distant, mouth tight at the corners, his rectangle of pizza untouched. It wasn't until just before the bell rang that I found out why. "Are you even going to show them?" he asked. Rose shrugged. "Show them what? It's no big deal." The suddenly serious look on her face, almost like a warning to Wolf to keep his mouth shut, suggested otherwise. "What's no big deal?" Dee Dee asked. With a roll of her eyes, Rose reached into her pocket and pulled a Post-it free, sticking it to the middle of the table for the rest of us to see. "I found it inside my math book. Somebody must have slipped it in there while I wasn't looking. It's nothing, seriously. There are so many worse things." She stared at Wolf, who stared right back, the two of them silently continuing some conversation that already started. Dee Dee and I looked at the note. It obviously wasn't one of the ones from Mr. Sword's class. There were no words aside from her name, no signature, no way of knowing who wrote it. But the meaning was clear. And then here's the picture of it. The war had begun. The catch. A long time ago or so, the story goes, some guy named Adam was lounging around the garden nibbling on a fig when the powers that be told him he should start naming everything he saw, so he did. He went around putting labels on everything. You're a cow, you're a tree, you're an ant, you're a snake, and so on. It was the easiest way to start making sense of the world. He probably didn't know it, but he started a trend. In middle school, everybody gets a label. It's important. It makes it easier to spread gossip, to choose seats in the auditorium during school-wide convocations, to decide who belongs where. I was a nerd, tapioca or no tapioca. We were all nerds, the whole tribe. I wrote an award-winning poem once, which I guess made me a lifetime member. Dee Dee was in an accelerated classes and sometimes bragged about his 136 IQ, not to mention the whole Gary Gygax thing. Even Bench was all aces across the gradebook. We all earned our badge in one way or another, but only one of us was a genius. Truthfully, Wolf was closer to Amadeus Ozart than I would ever be to Robert Frost. I'd heard him play a dozen times from the hallway right outside the door of his family's living room, holding my breath so he didn't know I was there, because as soon as he saw me, he stopped, as if somehow his talent was something he still wanted to hide, even though everyone in the entire school knew how good he was. For most people, it's all they knew about him. Morgan Thompson played piano prodigy, but most of them hadn't even heard him play. He never made a mistake, at least not one that I could hear. Maybe he just knew how to hide them, move past them so quickly that nobody noticed. Playing the piano isn't like writing poetry. You can edit. You can go back and erase. If you stop and start over, people will know. They will say to themselves, well, it was good, but it wasn't perfect. Nobody knows what the first draft of Frost's poem looked like except for Robert Frost. When he showed them to the world, they were just how he wanted them. Listening to Wolf was like reading Robert Frost. I would stand outside the door, my steps muffled by the Thompsons' brown carpet, my eyes closed, dizzy with jealousy, because he was still just a kid. We were all still just kids. Kids were supposed to make mistakes. I'd never actually heard him perform in front of a crowd. I'd never been to any of Wolf's recitals. I would have gone if he had asked me. We all would have. But he never asked. He only spoke of them after the fact, and then only when one of us noticed the new ribbon or trophy on the cherrywood mantel in his living room. You weren't stashed in a closet like my You Showed Up soccer trophy. Wolf's accolades were on prominent display, visible from the foyer of their 3-story house. You could see them through the prominent bay window that protruded like a blister from the front. It was a shrine, blue ribbons and cold metal and dust 2 or 3 times a year. Wolf would grab his sheet music and march off to conquer one competition or another, returning with another trophy for the shelf. Ask Wolf how he got so good, and he'll tell you what he'd expect to hear. Practice. And in a way, that's true, I guess. You have to want to practice that much. And Wolf did. But I think he did it mostly to please his parents, to give them something that they had absolutely no choice to be happy about. I can appreciate that. I sometimes picture him up there at one of those recitals, everyone in the audience in stiff, scratchy black clothes, programs folded in their laps. I sometimes wonder what it was like for him under those blinding lights, dressed in his suit, his eyes closed, body swaying, fingers dancing, the audience breathless, the music haunting. I wonder if he ever secretly wished I had been there for him to cheer him on. I feel guilty about it, or maybe it's just regret. I'm not sure I quite know the difference yet. I've never been to a single one of Wolf's recitals, but I'd been to every one of Bench's football games, and they were all ugly. It was the lone Friday game of the season, and this time it was under the big lights, or at least bigger than usual. The Branton High Cougars were away, so the Fighting Falcons of Branton Middle School had the high school filled, which meant that the 300 or so people who usually came to watch the middle school game were scattered among bleachers that could hold 2,000. Everybody could sit close to the action, only we didn't. I waited for Dee Dee and Wolf by the gates as usual. Then we paid our $2 and went to find a seat. I pointed to an empty section about 3 rows up and started that way when Wolf stopped me. Not there, he said. He looked up the stairs. Let's go sit at the very top this time. I looked back at the spot he'd turned down and noticed what I hadn't at first. Jason, Noah, and Cameron clumped together on the row below that. They were all huddled over Jason's phone, laughing at something completely idiotic. No doubt. I obviously lingered too long. Cameron looked up and saw me, then elbowed the other two. Look, it's the Roman Legion, Jason said, which was hilarious, apparently at least to the 3 of them. Jason proceeded to give some kind of salute like he was karate chopping the sky. Hail Caesar! He cried, more laughter. Wolf gave him a gesture back, which less obvious, but more to the point. Hand pressed close to his chest in case any of the adults were looking. What was that all about? I asked. I'd seen Wolf blow Jason and company off 100 times, but I'd never seen him flip them off before. Who cares, Wolf said, turning back around and heading up the bleachers. I followed Wolf and Dee Dee up the steps to the very top where you could hear the flag snap. It was chilly, the kind of cold you don't really notice until someone puts a mug of warm cider in your hands and you realize how stiff your fingers are. not just the middle ones. How the first sip stings your lips. The night was clear, though, star-studded, and it felt good to be out in the sharp autumn air, the smell of hot dogs and fresh popcorn and wet leaves. I sat next to Dee Dee, who sat next to Wolf, our butts nearly freezing to the metal bench. It was the fourth game of the season, and the Falcons were 1-3, already an improvement over last year's 0-11. Unfortunately, according to the roll on Dee Dee's die, we were expected to lose again. According to everyone else who talked to, we were expected to get creamed. Will we at least score a touchdown? I asked, and Dee Dee rolled for it. There was no chance of anyone seeing him all the way at the top, but he still kept the dragon hidden in his palm. He rolled a 2, which meant a 20% chance. That seemed about right. I looked over at Wolf, who seemed preoccupied with the crowd, except he wasn't looking in the direction of Jason Baker's spiky blonde hair. He was looking for someone else. Did she say she was coming? Who? You know who. I'm not looking for Rose necessarily, Wolf said. I'm just browsing. It was a good word. It might make a nice line of poetry. Browsing the crowd for someone worth the price of a conversation. I knew I'd never remember it, though. Let's see if any of the cheerleaders will screw up their somersaults, Dee Dee said. He rolled. 70% chance of a cheerleader wipeout. At least that gave us something to look forward to. Not that I wished embarrassment on anyone in particular, just that anyone falling on their rear was funny. Wolf was still scanning the crowd for not Rose necessarily. It wouldn't have surprised me to see her lumbering up the steps to join us. In the span of 1 week, Rose Holland had not only navigated her way into our lunch table, she seemed to have stuck a harpoon in Wolf's side and reeled him in. I still wasn't sure what was up between the two of them, but I was glad to see Wolf out there with us, cheering Bench on.